Today, I'd like to continue our journey through the book of Deuteronomy. We're in chapter 22 of that amazing book, and we're talking about some of the different customs that have evolved over the years for the Jewish people and the basis for those customs in the Jewish law. Very interesting one in terms of the building structures. When you build something, they say you should build a parapet around your roof so that no one falls off and dies when you are building a new house. So when you build that house, it's very important how you structure the roof because they're concerned again about people falling off the roof. Interesting that this would be featured here in the book of Deuteronomy when at this time, according to the address of Moses, most of the people are living in tents. So this talks about a time when the people certainly were more settled in cities and towns, and they were building larger structures for homes, but they were very much concerned about the safety so that no one would be harmed. Very interesting how they take care of the people, and it's almost like today when you have certain insurance regulations in terms of how you build your house and how to make it safe. Very interesting that they were concerned about that in those times. Also, they said you should not sow your vineyard with two different kinds of seeds because that produce cannot be offered in the sacrifice at the temple. So, depending on how you sow your vineyard, you have to be very careful because what you're thinking about is, well, I'm going to bring this produce to the temple. So again, two different seeds would be mixing things, and that's not a good thing in terms of the sacrifice you're offering. So the fascinating point here is how the agricultural practices are determined in terms of the religious practices. So both of those kind of melding together here. You also say that you should not plow a field with an ox and an ass harnessed together. So very important in terms of how you plow your field. Again, putting those two animals together could have been created problems. So they say the practical thing, just have the either the oxen or the ass, but not the two together. And also that you should not wear cloth of two different kinds of threads that are woven together. So when you're making your cloth, make it with the one kind of thread. Don't mix those threads together. Interesting in terms of how we might design our clothes today and the interweaving of different types of threads. That was not to be done in those days. Today, we might take a different look at that, of course, and say, well, that might create more color, more style, different ways. They just wanted the simple garments of the one thread woven together. Twisted cords should be placed at the four corners of your cloak. So when you're wearing your cloak, very important that you put those twisted cords at the four corners. Again, a sign of the sense of the Jewish people and the dedication with those four corners to their God. Now, what happens, again, these practical situations that come up in the book of Deuteronomy, what happens if a man brings false charges against a wife with regard to her virginity, and her parents produce evidence that she was actually a virgin? So there's this man, he's married, and the code, of course, would say that the wife should be a virgin. And the husband says, well, wait a minute, we just had our sexual relations together, and I found out that my wife was not a virgin. So this would be kind of a horrible thing because, how would he know? Because he hasn't had intercourse with her, obviously, before the marriage. But on the other hand, the parents produce evidence that she was actually a virgin. And what would be the evidence? It could be a bridal garment or a sheet with a little blood from a first marital relation. So that was always something that you would keep in the back of your mind as a parent, that this initial relationship, when they had their first intercourse together, you would look to save the sheet or the garment as proof, just in case the husband would lie. Because, again, you're looking at a situation here where the word of the man would predominate over the word of the woman. So, again, it'd be very important here to have some evidence to contradict it. Now, what happens if the man makes that claim and the mother and father have this evidence and say, hey, wait a minute, no, she was actually a virgin, and here's the evidence of that? The man would be flogged. So this would be a very serious situation. And he would also be fined 100 silver shekels, a huge amount, 100 silver shekels. So again, looking at this, you would say, I'm not going to bring these false charges because of what could happen. And why would he want to bring false charges? Well, maybe he just didn't care for his wife and he wants to kind of get rid of her and marry somebody else. You never know what the situation might be. And so this evidence, of course, would contradict his word, and he would have to be flogged, and he would have to pay this huge fine. And where would that money go? Interestingly, that 100 silver shekels goes to the girl's father. So again, in this economic system, the girl's father has an interest in making sure that he has that evidence because he doesn't want to, lose this money. And of course, also the humiliation of his daughter and family. All of these would be very difficult in terms of a community, a small community where everybody knew one another, a tribe situation. It would be a terrible humiliation. So the father would, and mother, of course, would be very concerned with this evidence, that they would have this evidence that their daughter was a virgin. She will remain his wife when that happens. And also, another consequence, he cannot divorce her as long as he lives. So there can be no divorce. Whereas, um, if there was no situation like this, he could divorce her with a written bill of divorce and the marriage would be ended. But if he made this claim and it was proven to be false, no divorce was possible. So again, this would greatly discourage any lying. And when you think of laws like this, you're saying to yourself, well, why did they get into this situation where they needed these laws? Obviously, there were husbands who were trying to do this. And so to discourage them and to make sure that this did not happen, they evolved these laws, which are very interesting, but also very important protections for the woman, for her word and for her honesty and for her integrity as a woman, and a very important protection for the mother and father, the family of this woman. So these protections are extremely important in that society in that time. Now, what happens though if the charge is true? If there is no evidence that she was a virgin? And it could be twofold here. Maybe that there was actually no evidence because she wasn't a virgin, but maybe there was no evidence because the mother and father, for whatever reason, did not obtain that evidence. So these are some factors. So what happens if the charge is true? Well, the girl would be stoned to death by her townsmen. So everyone in the town could gather together and stone this woman because she was not a virgin. So again, the emphasis on virginity and the importance of this for marriage, that this woman should be faithful to her vow to be a virgin. And the idea was that she has committed a crime against Israel. And so evil will be purged from your midst. So the way that they purged that evil was through the stoning. And that's how serious it was, that there was considered to be an offense against Israel.